Ladies and gentlemen, I want to speak to you today about the divine wisdom that a woman of God must carry within her spirit. A woman chosen by God is not just any woman. She is set apart, full of purpose and designed for greatness. And because of that, there are things she must never reveal too soon or to the wrong man. The enemy understands that when a woman reveals too much too soon, she gives away her strength, her power, and her influence. That is why wisdom must be her closest companion. There are 3 things that a woman of purpose must guard with all diligence when dealing with a man. A woman's heart is one of the most precious gifts she possesses. It is the center of her emotions, dreams, and deepest desires. It carries the essence of who she is, her purpose, and her capacity to love and nurture. However, if not guarded wisely, it can be easily wounded, misled, or taken for granted. That is why a woman must understand the power of discernment before she entrusts her heart to anyone. Too often, women give away their hearts too soon, revealing their desires, emotions, and vulnerabilities without first testing the intentions of the man they are involved with. This is where wisdom must step in. A man's true character is not revealed in words, but in consistent actions over time. Just because a man expresses interest does not mean he is worthy of access to a woman's heart. Interest can be temporary, but character is permanent. A woman who is eager to share her heart before evaluating a man's integrity risks being emotionally misled. God designed a woman to be loved, cherished, and protected, not to be taken advantage of. That is why she must be intentional about guarding her heart. She must be careful not to allow emotions to lead her before wisdom does. Feelings can be deceptive. They can blind a person to warning signs and red flags that are meant to be heeded. Many women have ignored their instincts, choosing to believe in potential rather than reality, only to find themselves heartbroken when the true nature of the man is revealed. Guarding the heart does not mean closing it off completely or becoming fearful of love. It means setting boundaries, using discernment, and allowing time to test the sincerity of a person's actions. A woman must learn to observe, listen, and pay attention to what is being shown to her rather than just what is being said. If a man is inconsistent, dishonest, or lacking in spiritual depth, these are signs that he is not the right one to be given access to her emotions. Furthermore, a woman must remember that her value is not determined by a man's attention. She does not need to prove her worth by over-explaining herself, over-giving, or compromising her standards. A man who truly values a woman will take the time to pursue her honorably and with respect. She must allow herself to be pursued rather than rushing to open her heart out of fear of being alone. Desperation leads to poor choices, while patience leads to divine alignment. Another important aspect of guarding the heart is seeking God's guidance before making emotional investments. Prayer and spiritual discernment are key in determining whether a relationship is from God or merely a distraction. When a woman places her heart in God's hands first, she allows Him to guide her steps and protect her from unnecessary pain. The Bible reminds us in Proverbs 3:5-6 to trust in the Lord with all our hearts and lean not on our own understanding. This means surrendering relationships to God and allowing Him to reveal what is hidden. Women must also be aware that the heart is not just about emotions, but also about purpose. A woman who guards her heart ensures that her dreams, goals, and divine calling are not compromised for the sake of a relationship. The wrong person can derail a woman's destiny if she allows emotions to cloud her judgment. That is why it is crucial to be equally yoked with someone who aligns with her purpose, rather than someone who distracts from it. Ultimately, guarding the heart is an act of wisdom, self-respect, and faith. Is a recognition that love should be nurtured within the right environment, one of trust, honor, and divine purpose. A woman who values herself will not give her heart away carelessly, but will wait for the one who is worthy of receiving it. A man's character is the foundation of who he truly is. It is not in what he says, but in how he lives, how he treats others, and how he responds to life's challenges. A woman who desires a strong and purposeful relationship must be intentional about testing a man's character before giving him access to her heart. Too often, attraction, charm, and sweet words can blind a woman to the reality of a man's true nature. But wisdom teaches that love is not built on words alone. It is built on integrity, consistency, and spiritual depth. A man's character is best tested over time. Time reveals what words try to hide. A person can only pretend for so long before their true nature comes to the surface. This is why rushing into emotional attachment without first observing a man's actions is dangerous. A woman must take her time to watch how he handles responsibilities, how he treats people who can do nothing for him, and how he reacts under pressure. The way a man deals with difficulties says more about him than his words ever could. Does he remain calm, patient, and solution-focused, or does he lose control, become angry, and blame others? A man's reaction to adversity reveals whether he is a leader or a liability. One of the greatest tests of a man's character is his consistency. Anyone can be kind, respectful, and attentive in the beginning, but true character is revealed in long-term actions. Does he keep his word? Does he follow through on his promises? Does he honor commitments even when it is inconvenient for him? A man who is inconsistent in small things will be inconsistent in big things. If he cannot be trusted with simple responsibilities, he cannot be trusted with a woman's heart, future, and family. Integrity is another key measure of a man's character. Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. It is easy to appear honorable in public, but what does a man do when he thinks no one is looking? Does he compromise his values when under pressure? Does he engage in secret behaviors that contradict the image he presents? A woman must pay attention to how a man lives his private life, because eventually that private life will affect her. If a man is dishonest, unfaithful, or lacks self-discipline in his personal life, those traits will eventually show up in the relationship. Spiritual maturity is another important factor in assessing character. A man who does not submit to God cannot lead a woman spiritually. If he does not pray, seek wisdom, or strive to grow in his faith, he will not be equipped to cover and protect a woman's heart. A woman must observe whether a man seeks God for guidance or if he relies solely on his own understanding. A man who is led by God will lead with wisdom, patience, and humility, while a man who ignores spiritual growth will eventually lead with pride, selfishness, and confusion. The way a man treats others is also a reflection of his heart. It is easy for him to be kind to the woman he is pursuing, but how does he treat people who have no status or influence? How does he talk about others behind their backs? Does he respect women, elders, and those in authority? A man who dishonors others will eventually dishonor the woman he is with. A woman must pay close attention to his words and actions, because they will reveal more about his future behavior than any romantic gestures ever could. Testing a man's character is not about being judgmental. It is about being wise. A woman must ensure that she is connecting with someone who has the maturity, integrity, and consistency to walk with her in purpose. Love alone is not enough. A relationship must be built on trust, honor, and spiritual alignment. The right man will not just say the right things, he will live them. A woman's vulnerabilities are the deepest parts of her soul. Her fears, her past wounds, her insecurities, and the delicate emotions she carries within. These are not things to be exposed carelessly or shared with just anyone. They are sacred parts of her being that must be handled with wisdom and discernment. When a woman reveals her vulnerabilities too soon or to the wrong person, she risks being hurt, manipulated, or taken for granted. That is why she must be selective about who she allows into the most sensitive areas of her life. Not every man is equipped to handle a woman's vulnerability with care. Some men are drawn to a woman's weakness, not to protect her, but to take advantage of it. A man who lacks integrity may see a woman's fears and insecurities as an opportunity to gain control, rather than as something to nurture and safeguard. A woman must be able to discern whether a man is a protector or a predator. A protector will cover her in prayer, uplift her with encouragement, and handle her wounds with patience. A predator will use her emotions against her, make her dependent on his validation, and manipulate her into giving more of herself than she should. A woman's emotional openness should be earned, not given freely. Just as she would not entrust a valuable possession to a stranger, she should not entrust her heart to someone who has not proven himself trustworthy. Trust should be built gradually through consistency, honesty, and respect. A woman must observe how a man responds to difficult situations, how he speaks about others, and whether he demonstrates emotional and spiritual maturity. If he is careless with his own emotions reckless with his words, or lacks discipline in his life, he is not qualified to handle her vulnerabilities. One of the greatest dangers of exposing vulnerability too soon is the risk of emotional dependency. When a woman shares her deepest fears and struggles with a man before he has shown true commitment, she may begin to rely on him for emotional stability. If that man is not strong enough to handle that responsibility, it creates an unhealthy attachment where she seeks validation from someone who's not fully invested in her well-being. A woman must first establish emotional security within herself and her relationship with God before placing that burden on another person. Healing must come before exposure. If a woman has past wounds, she must seek healing through prayer, personal growth, and wise counsel before expecting a man to fix what is broken. Many relationships suffer because one person looks to another to heal wounds that only God can truly mend. A man can support a woman in her healing journey, but he should not be expected to be the source of her healing. When a woman is whole, she will be able to share herself in a way that adds value to a relationship rather than placing an unhealthy burden on it. A woman must also understand that true strength is found in selective vulnerability. There is wisdom in knowing when to share, what to share, and with whom to share. Being strong does not mean never opening up. It means opening up in the right environment. The right man will create a space where a woman feels safe to express herself without fear of judgment or rejection. He will not use her past against her, nor will he diminish her feelings. Instead, he will handle her heart with care and treat her emotions with respect. A wise woman protects her vulnerabilities not out of fear but out of wisdom. She understands that her emotions, past, and struggles are not weaknesses but parts of her story that deserve to be honored. She does not rush to reveal everything about herself to someone who has not shown the capacity to value her fully. By guarding her heart and being discerning in whom she trusts, she ensures that her vulnerabilities are placed in the hands of someone who will cherish them, not misuse them. A man's spiritual maturity is the foundation of his leadership, character, and ability to build a healthy, God-centered relationship. It is not enough for a man to be physically attractive, financially stable, or charming in conversation. If he lacks spiritual depth, he lacks the wisdom and strength to lead a woman in the right direction. A woman who desires a purposeful relationship must be intentional about observing a man's spiritual life before giving him access to her heart. His faith, values, and relationship with God will determine how he loves, respects, and treats her. A man's spiritual maturity is revealed in how he prioritizes his relationship with God. It is not about how often he attends church or how well he can quote scripture, but rather how deeply he applies God's word in his daily life. A spiritually mature man does not just say he believes in God, his actions reflect his commitment to living righteously. He seeks wisdom, prays consistently, and submits to God's authority in all areas of his life. His decisions are guided by biblical principles rather than emotions, peer pressure, or worldly desires. A woman must pay close attention to whether a man's faith is genuine or if it is merely for show. The way a man handles challenges and adversity is another test of his spiritual maturity. When life becomes difficult, does he turn to God for strength and direction, or does he react with anger, fear, and impulsiveness? A spiritually mature man understands that trials are a part of life, but he does not allow them to shake his faith. Instead, he remains steadfast in prayer, seeks God's wisdom, and faces difficulties with patience and resilience. A man who lacks spiritual maturity will easily become discouraged, make reckless decisions, or blame others for his struggles. This kind of instability will eventually affect the relationship, causing unnecessary stress and conflict. Spiritual maturity is also evident in how a man treats others, especially those who cannot benefit him. A man who is truly led by God will exhibit the fruit of the Spirit: love, kindness, patience, humility, and self-control. He will honor his commitments, treat people with respect, and show compassion even when it is inconvenient. If a man claims to love God but is rude, arrogant, or selfish in his interactions with others, his faith is not deeply rooted. A woman must observe how he speaks about others, how he handles disagreements, and whether he serves and uplifts those around him. A man who lacks spiritual maturity will often be controlling, prideful, and unwilling to admit his faults. A spiritually mature man understands the responsibility of leadership in a relationship. He does not manipulate or dominate, but rather leads with wisdom, grace, and humility. He values partnership and seeks to grow alongside the woman he is with. He encourages her spiritual growth, prays for her, and supports her purpose. A man who lacks spiritual maturity may view leadership as control, expecting submission without accountability. He may use scripture to justify his own selfish desires rather than to guide and protect the relationship in righteousness. A woman must also be cautious of a man who is spiritually passive. A man who does not take his faith seriously will struggle to provide spiritual covering for his household. If he does not prioritize prayer, reading the word, or seeking God's guidance, he will not be equipped to lead a relationship in a way that honors God. A man who is spiritually lazy will often compromise on values, allow sin to take root, and make decisions based on convenience rather than conviction. A wise woman does not settle for a man who simply claims to know God. She watches how he lives. His spiritual maturity will determine the direction of the relationship, the stability of their future, and the legacy they build together. By choosing a man who is truly rooted in faith, she ensures that her relationship is built on a firm foundation that will stand the test of time. A woman's purpose is not an afterthought. It is a divine assignment, placed within her before she was even born. It is the reason for her existence, the calling she must fulfill, and the unique contribution she is meant to make in the world. A woman must be careful not to compromise her purpose for the sake of a relationship. Instead, she must align her purpose with a man's vision to ensure they are walking in the same direction. If a man's vision does not align with her purpose, the relationship will become a place of frustration, confusion, and lost potential. A man's vision is the driving force of his life. It is the assignment God has given him, the direction he is moving toward, and the impact he is called to make. A woman must take time to understand whether a man has a clear vision and whether his vision complements her own purpose. If a man is unsure about where he is going, he cannot effectively lead a woman anywhere. A woman must not connect herself to a man who has no direction, because without vision, he will lead her into distraction, stagnation, or even destruction. Purpose and vision must be in agreement for a relationship to thrive. When a woman and a man are aligned in their calling, they strengthen one another, they build together, encourage one another's growth, and pursue a shared mission. But when their directions are opposite, they begin to pull against each other, creating unnecessary tension and struggle. A woman must ask herself whether a man's vision supports her purpose or whether it will require her to abandon the assignment God has given her. If she has to compromise who she is in order to fit into his life, then the relationship is not in alignment. Many women make the mistake of thinking they can change a man's vision over time. They believe that if they love him enough, support him enough, or pray for him enough, he will eventually embrace a vision that aligns with their own. But a man's vision comes from God, not from a woman's desires. If his vision is not already aligned with what God has placed in her heart, she must accept that he may not be the right partner for her journey. A woman must not waste time trying to force compatibility where there is none. Instead, she must trust that God has someone whose vision naturally aligns with hers. A woman must also be aware that love alone is not enough to sustain a relationship if purpose and vision are not in agreement. Many relationships begin with strong emotional connections but fall apart because the individuals involved are walking in different directions. Love is powerful, but it is not a substitute for alignment. When a couple shares a common vision, their love is strengthened because they are working toward the same goal. But when their visions are in conflict, love can turn into frustration as they struggle to find common ground. Patience is key when aligning purpose with vision. A woman must not rush into a relationship based on emotions alone. She must take the time to understand a man's vision, observe his commitment to it, and assess whether it complements her own purpose. A man who is serious about his vision will be intentional about finding a woman whose purpose aligns with his. He will not ask her to abandon her calling, but will seek to integrate her gifts, talents, and assignment into the journey he is walking. Likewise, a woman must ensure that she is not just following a man blindly, but is truly called to walk alongside him in purpose. A man without vision is like a ship without a destination. He moves, but he has no clear direction. He may appear strong, confident, or charming, but without a vision, he is unstable, unpredictable, and unable to provide purposeful leadership. A woman must be careful not to attach herself to a man who lacks vision, because doing so can lead to frustration, stagnation, and wasted time. A man without vision is dangerous not because he is intentionally harmful, but because he does not know where he is going, and anyone who follows him risks getting lost in the process. A man's vision is his God-given assignment, his purpose, and his reason for existing. It is what drives his decisions, determines his priorities, and influences how he leads those around him. A man who lacks vision is easily swayed by circumstances, emotions, and the opinions of others. He does not have a clear sense of direction, so he moves aimlessly, making impulsive choices that often lead to unnecessary struggles. Without vision, a man cannot offer stability, guidance, or long-term commitment. He may have temporary excitement, but without direction, his passion fades quickly, leaving confusion in its place. A woman who connects with a man who lacks vision may find herself constantly trying to push him toward purpose. She may see his potential, believe in his abilities, and try to inspire him to take action. But a man's vision cannot come from external pressure. It must come from within. If he does not already have a sense of purpose before entering a relationship, he will not suddenly develop one just because a woman believes in him. Instead, the relationship may become a burden, where she carries the weight of his indecision, frustration, and lack of progress. A man without vision often struggles with consistency. Because he has no clear goal, he frequently changes his mind, moves from one thing to another, and lacks the discipline to build something meaningful. He may start projects but never finish them, pursue ideas but abandon them when they become difficult, and make promises but fail to keep them. His inconsistency affects not only his own life, but also the lives of those connected to him. A woman who aligns herself with such a man may find herself constantly disappointed, always waiting for him to figure things out, while her own purpose is put on hold. A man without vision is also vulnerable to distractions and temptations. When a man knows his purpose, he is focused, disciplined, and intentional. He does not waste time on meaningless pursuits because he is committed to his assignment. But when a man lacks vision, he is easily pulled in different directions, following temporary pleasures, seeking validation from others, or engaging in destructive behaviors. Without a clear mission, he fills his life with things that do not truly satisfy, leading to a cycle of dissatisfaction and restlessness. A woman must understand that love alone cannot compensate for a lack of vision. Many women enter relationships thinking that if they love a man enough, he will eventually find his purpose. But love does not give a man vision. Only God can do that. A woman's role is not to create vision for a man, but to support a man who already has one. She must be discerning, watching for evidence that a man is actively pursuing his calling before she commits her time, energy, and future to him. A wise woman values alignment over attachment. She does not settle for a relationship based on potential, but rather seeks a partnership that is grounded in purpose. A man who has vision will lead with confidence, provide stability, and inspire those around him to grow. But a man without vision, no matter how charming or well-intentioned, is a risk to any woman's future. By choosing wisely, a woman protects her destiny and ensures that her relationship is one that moves toward purpose rather than drifting into confusion. A woman who understands her worth knows that she is destined, not desperate. She is not in a hurry to settle, nor is she willing to compromise her values just to be chosen. She knows that her purpose was established before she was born, and that her destiny is not dependent on the approval or validation of any man. A woman who walks in this truth carries herself with confidence, wisdom, and grace because she understands that her value is not determined by a relationship, but by the calling that God has placed upon her life. Desperation leads to poor decisions, but destiny leads to purpose. When a woman operates from a place of desperation, she becomes willing to lower her standards, overlook red flags, and tolerate behaviors that do not align with her worth. She may settle for relationships that drain her, accepting mistreatment in the name of love. She may ignore her purpose, putting her dreams on hold just to keep a man in her life. But a woman who understands her destiny refuses to compromise. She knows that her life has meaning beyond romance, and that her time, energy, and heart should only be given to a man who values and respects her calling. A woman who is destined does not chase, she attracts. She does not beg for attention or fight for a man's love because she knows that the right man will recognize her value without her having to prove it. She is focused on her growth, her mission, and her relationship with God. And because of this, she naturally draws people into her life who align with her purpose. A desperate woman seeks validation from others, but a destined woman finds validation in her Creator. She does not need to be constantly reassured of her worth because she already knows who she is. A woman who is destined also understands the power of patience. She does not rush into relationships out of fear of being alone, nor does she force connections that are not meant for her. She trusts in God's timing, knowing that the right relationship will come at the right time. A desperate woman, on the other hand, operates out of fear. She may settle for less because she believes time is running out, or she may cling to unhealthy relationships because she's afraid of being alone. But a woman of destiny understands that waiting is not a punishment, it is preparation. She knows that what is truly meant for her will not require her to beg, force, or compromise. A destined woman does not allow society's pressures to dictate her choices. The world often tries to convince women that they must be in a relationship to be valuable, that they must settle by a certain age, or that their worth is tied to their relationship status. But a woman who knows her destiny refuses to be controlled by these lies. She understands that she is complete with or without a relationship. She knows that marriage is a blessing, but it is not the sole purpose of her existence. She does not measure her success by whether or not she has a man, but by whether or not she is walking in obedience to her calling. A woman who is destined embraces her individuality. She knows that she was created with unique gifts, talents, and a purpose that is bigger than just being someone's partner. She invests in her personal growth, builds her skills, and pursues the dreams that God has placed in her heart. She does not wait for a man to complete her. She steps into her destiny with confidence, knowing that the right man will complement her journey rather than distract her from it. A woman who understands she is destined will never settle for less than what she deserves. She does not compromise her values, shrink herself to fit someone else's expectations, or tolerate relationships that hinder her growth. She moves with confidence, knowing that she is not waiting for a man to give her worth, she already has it. She does not live in desperation because she trusts in the plans God has for her, knowing that when the time is right, everything that is meant for her will fall into place. A man's leadership is not defined by his ability to control, dominate, or demand submission. It is rooted in his relationship with God. True leadership is not about power, but about responsibility. A godly man leads with wisdom, integrity, and humility, recognizing that his authority comes not from himself, but from his obedience to God. A man who is not submitted to God cannot effectively lead anyone else. If a man does not seek God's direction for his own life, how can he provide direction for a woman, a family, or a community? A godly leader is first a servant. Jesus demonstrated that true leadership is found in service, not in control. A man who leads according to God's design does not see leadership as a way to satisfy his ego or exert dominance over others. Instead, he leads with love, putting the needs of those he is responsible for above his own. He is patient, kind, and sacrificial in his leadership, ensuring that his actions reflect the heart of God. A man who is selfish, prideful, or careless with the hearts of others is not leading. He is manipulating. A godly leader is consistent in his faith. He does not waver in his beliefs, compromise his values, or allow the pressures of the world to dictate his choices. He is disciplined in prayer, faithful in his commitments, and unwavering in his convictions. A man who lacks spiritual discipline will struggle to lead effectively. If he is unstable in his walk with God, he will be unstable in his relationships, decisions, and responsibilities. A woman must be careful not to attach herself to a man who claims leadership but lacks the spiritual foundation to sustain it. A man's leadership is revealed in how he handles adversity. When challenges arise, does he panic, make reckless decisions, or blame others? Or does he turn to God for wisdom, face difficulties with courage, and lead with strength? A godly leader does not allow fear to control him. He remains steadfast, trusting in God's plan even when the path is unclear. A man who runs from responsibility, avoids accountability, or reacts emotionally to hardship is not prepared to lead anyone. A woman must observe how a man responds to trials before entrusting him with her heart. A godly leader values integrity above all else. He does not say one thing and do another. He does not make promises he cannot keep. He does not lie, deceive, or manipulate to get his way. His word is reliable, his actions reflect his beliefs, and his character is trustworthy. A man who lacks integrity will eventually lead those who follow him into confusion and pain. A woman must not be impressed by a man's words alone. She must examine whether his actions align with his faith. A man who leads according to God's design seeks to build, not destroy. He does not tear others down with his words, belittle those around him, or use his authority for personal gain. Instead, he speaks life, encourages growth, and lifts others up. He leads by example, showing what it means to walk in righteousness, wisdom, and love. A man who constantly criticizes, controls, or discourages others is not leading. He is weakening those he is responsible for. A godly leader understands the weight of his influence. He does not take his role lightly or treat leadership as a title rather than a responsibility. He knows that his actions affect more than just himself, and he seeks God's guidance in every decision. He is not perfect, but he is intentional about growing, learning, and becoming a better man each